It is my pleasure to be with you today and to share on a timely subject of attitude and the adjustments that we increasingly are being called to make as the world around us is rapidly changing. Let me start with a simple story by Mark Chernow called Just One Small Sip. Once upon a time, there was a woman who had been lost in the desert for 3 whole days without water. Just as she was about to collapse, she saw what appeared to be a lake just a few hundred yards in front of her. Could it be? Or is it just a mirage? She thought to herself. With the last bit of strength she could muster, she staggered toward the lake and quickly learned that her prayers had been answered, that it was no mirage. It was indeed a large spring-fed lake filled of fresh water, more fresh water than she could ever drink in her entire lifetime. Yet, while she was literally dying of thirst, she couldn't bring herself to drink the water. She simply stood by the water's edge and stared down at it. There was a passerby riding on a camel from a nearby desert town who was watching the woman's bizarre behavior. He got off his camel, walked up to the thirsty woman, and asked, "Why don't you drink the water, ma'am?" She looked up at the man with an exhausted, distraught expression across her face and tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm dying of thirst," she said, "but there is no way that I will be able to drink so much water in this lake. No matter what I do, I can't possibly finish it all." The passerby smiled, bent down, scooped up some water with his hands, lifted it to the woman's mouth, and said, "Ma'am, your opportunity right now, and as you move forward throughout the rest of your life, is to understand that you don't have to drink the whole lake to quench your thirst. You can simply take one sip, just one small sip, and then another if you choose. Focus only on the mouthful in front of you, and all your anxiety, fear, and overwhelm about the rest will gradually fade." So, what is the moral of the author's story in relation to attitude? For me, what I recognized first and foremost is the ability that our attitude has on us to paralyze our behavior and to stop us from taking actions. So, one attitude can paralyze us so that we can choose to die than to do what is so obvious. Our attitude can paralyze us emotionally and behaviorally. So rather than focusing on one sip, I become overwhelmed by the whole lake. Really, this is what attitude adjustment is all about. Small, positive behavioral changes that I make moment by moment, and that adds up to something worthwhile in my life. And in hindsight, it turns out to be something far better than I would have ever imagined. Attitude adjustments They are not huge quantum leap things, but they are little things done in such a way that it accumulates for us inner strength and outer responses that have got positive impacts. So when we think about attitude or when we look at attitude, this is what we're talking about. Taking one sip, one moment at a time. We're looking at this whole concept of small is beautiful. On the spiritual learning curve, attitude is placed in the middle of awareness and action. The saying goes, as is your awareness, so is your attitude. And as is your attitude, so is your vision. And as is your vision, so is your action. Attitude is the pivotal point of balance between awareness and action. And this is why the attitude we hold shapes our behaviors and the way we face the challenges of life. So, what makes up attitude? Let's look at some of the elements of attitude. Attitude is a combination of our thoughts, our feelings, our opinions, and beliefs. This gets manifested in three basic ways: emotional, behavioral, and belief. Below are examples of emotional, behavioral, and belief based on the story we've just heard. These examples from the story describe how we can become victims of our own attitude, but with a little adjustment, we can change that attitude. The emotional aspect to attitude is at the level of our feelings. For example, in the story, the woman was welling up with tears, saying to the traveler, I'm dying of thirst. And at the same time, overreacting at the simple act of taking a sip of water. Paralyzed by her attitude, she is unable to take action. Then along came the traveler who talked her into seeing something from a different perspective and made her feel an inner calm, an inner strength, and feeding her that sip of water with his own hand. The behavioral aspect is how we act or behave. Referring back to the story again and the woman's behavior, because there is too much water there in the lake to drink, no matter what I do, I can't possibly finish it at all. What were those words all about? She was thirsty. The water was there. She could have drunk it. But being overwhelmed, her behavior was irrational. The way we behave takes care of the way we react to certain things. And behavior is one of the primary things that we should take care of in order to help with adjustments we need to make. And then the other element is the belief component. What the person believes in, what the person truly holds to be a truth for them. So, for example, in the story, it looked like unless she finished the whole lot, her thirst would not be quenched. So, where was that coming from? Something she grew up believing in that left a deep imprint in her subconscious that surfaced suddenly in that traumatic moment. This must have emerged from some knowledge she acquired along the path of her life that created beliefs that she carried. It is important to connect our attitude to unlearning what we have learned and to accumulate the strength of the new learning that would liberate us from beliefs that serve to paralyze us at the level of attitude in particular. Adjustments come from the insights of our new learning. So attitude adjustments are given expressions through our emotions, through our behavior, and through our beliefs. Attitude can be benevolent or it can be negative. It is also said your attitude creates an atmosphere which can be positive or negative, and it can become a magnet that attracts people to you or drives them away from you. For example, if you are caring, if you are loving, accepting, and understanding, there will be one response to that. Or if you are upset, if you are unhappy, if you are sad, and if you are critical, there will be another response to that. But in either case, the response will be the same, reflected back to you. And so this means that whatever is my attitude, I can either break a wall with that attitude, if it is a benevolent attitude, or I can build a wall if it's a negative attitude. And so it will be reflected back to me either way. So with this basic understanding of attitude, let us focus on the subject of today, which is adjusting our attitudes. Let us cultivate optimistic approaches by looking at three simple attitude adjustments. And then, of course, using these as examples, you will build your own list of attitude adjustments based on your practical life and the realities that you have to face on a daily basis. These are just examples for you. They're just showing you how they work, and in a very brief way too, how the little sips of the water, as it were, the little adjustments can have actually mega impact. So they're micro habits with mega impacts. So let us first of all look at what is a benevolent attitude. How would I identify a benevolent attitude? How do I know I have a benevolent attitude? So a benevolent attitude is to be kind. When I'm kind, my attitude will be a benevolent one. When I'm caring, when I'm compassionate, when I'm non-judgmental, to name a few. But one of them, I think, that is really needed in today's world is an inclusive attitude, an attitude that doesn't separate and put people in boxes, but an attitude that takes people out of boxes and put them on a platform that is called inclusivity. In this benevolent attitude, it works at the level of the self, it works at the level of our relationships with others, and it works at the level of the atmosphere that gets created by my attitude. You know, there's a saying that I walked into that room and I could cut that atmosphere. It was so thick. So that atmosphere was created by attitudes and perhaps a collective of people carrying the same attitude. And so it thickened the atmosphere in the room that I could almost cut it when I walk in. I could sense something was not right. Or if it's a benevolent attitude, then when I walk in, I feel a sense of freedom. I feel a sense of getting the permission to be myself. I feel a sense of caring in the room, of camaraderie in the room. So that would be an atmosphere created also by the collective attitudes of people in the room. So in these three simple attitude adjustment exercises, we will first identify the benevolent attitude with which to make the adjustment. And then we will commit to a practice to help us strengthen the attitude for over a long period of time. Because one is you made the adjustment, but then you just don't want to make it and leave it alone. So it slips back into the negative sector of the attitude, but you also want to keep it consistently moving in the direction that would become more and more benevolent. And so my attitude would then start opening up by these little adjustments that I'm making to it in my everyday life through my ordinary actions, through the ordinary things that I'm doing. And I'm not just waiting for the great, grand times when I have to make a big lecture or I have to be at a wedding or I have to do something great and then I have to change my attitude. It doesn't happen quite like that. It has to happen, with these small movements of adjustments over a long period of time. So we'll be looking at that as well. So attitude adjustment 1, it literally means that the awareness that I will have in order to make the adjustment to my attitude is new hope arises out of an attitude of gratitude. So there's this awareness. New hope arises out of an attitude of gratitude. So apply that now to a situation in your life. You have that awareness. You're now in a situation in life. When you are stressed out with the various challenges of day-to-day life, don't become angry. Don't become anxious. And adopt an attitude of blame leading to self-destruct. So normally, if something is going wrong, that would be my attitude. I would have an attitude that would become an angry attitude. And that anger would lead me to blame and to destruct myself in so many ways. So now I have to give that a twist and I have to make an adjustment. So simply adjust your attitude by looking at the silver lining. There's a saying, every cloud has a silver lining. The silver lining in the darkness of the despair that is causing my anger must be some kind of new hope. Remember, the awareness I had was new hope arises out of an attitude of gratitude. So I'm looking for the silver lining of this new hope in the darkness of despair. And I'm allowing it to emerge from the difficult situation I happen to find myself in. So an attitude adjustment will enable you to see it, to see that new hope, because that's what you're focusing on, the silver lining of a new hope that is almost invoking you to look at it, and that's what you're looking for. And to be grateful after you have seen it. So it's a little bit that rather than curse the darkness, have the attitude of lighting a candle. So you're looking for the new hope as the silver lining arising out of the difficult situation. And then you're being grateful for having seen it. So, to strengthen a benevolent attitude, you will start with a gratitude journal. I know this has become so popular because it really does heal the inner being. Starting and sustaining a gratitude journal is one of the best things we can do for ourselves, but particularly in relation to attitude adjustments, because we're seeing what it is we should be grateful for rather than what it is I should be so upset about. So, in this gratitude journal, I would ask you to do it every day. And what you're capturing at the end of every day, or as you experience it in that moment and you have the time to capture it as it happens, is to note down one or two or three or four adjustments that you have intentionally made during the day. And then those adjustments, not that you've just made them, but they have actually filled you with joy and appreciation. Now, these could be simple things. It could be like an act of kindness, a smile that you gave to another. It could be holding the door for another to go through, an act of courtesy. And so it could be very little things, or even walking out into the atmosphere and taking a deep breath of peace, not just a deep breath of air, but a deep breath of peace. So to begin the adjustments, keep it small and keep it simple, but allow the small and simple to emerge from within you a gratitude for the joy and appreciation you felt from those moments. Attitude adjustment 2, company colors the attitude. Company colors the attitude is my awareness. So start noticing, and I suppose this is an easy thing to do. Start noticing who you spend time with on a daily basis. If you find yourself gravitating to the company of pessimistic people, the result will be anxiety and doubt, and your attitude will be on a downward spiral of self doubt. The attitude adjustment that would be required in this case is to remember that my awareness is focused on company colors the attitude. So the attitude adjustment is to connect to people who are optimistic and grounded in life, who look at the problems in life as opportunities to grow, to learn, and to move forward progressively. And so seek out those people, make new friends. And even in your old friends, look for the optimistic traits in them and try to encourage that from them. Make this adjustment in your attitude, and you will find your attitude growing more optimistic. So, to strengthen a benevolent attitude in the realm of seeking out people who are optimists, start making new friends. Start making friends with people who are optimists. But you have an aim of doing this, and that is the aim of learning the art of optimism. Life is full of beautiful moments that usually the optimists are able to see. When you see those beautiful moments in your flashes of optimism, capture those moments as beautiful experiences in your life. And it would help to sustain in you that benevolent attitude. Attitude adjustment 3. The awareness that you would have here is challenge the discriminatory attitude with a benevolent reframing. Again, the awareness is challenge the discriminatory attitude with a benevolent reframing. Now, this is something that is extremely subtle. It could be gross, but it is also very subtle in us. And it is something that clogs our attitude in ways that deceive us. Our attitude is like many steps ahead of us, and our attitude dictates responses long before we realize what we have done and too late to make a difference in saying, I shouldn't have done that. And so this discriminatory attitude is something that we have to pay a lot of attention to and change those discriminatory behaviors. So if you have the habit of viewing situations and people with tendencies of prejudice, bias, or discrimination, challenge that attitude immediately. As soon as I get a whiff that I just had an attitude that was discriminatory, stop it in its tracks. The attitude of adjustment in relation to this, or the adjustment to that attitude of discrimination, calls for a benevolent reframing, a shift in perspective. It calls for me being honest with myself and setting aside justifications and excuses for my behavior based on discriminatory attitudes. So the adjustments here is calling for a benevolent reframing based on an inner honesty with myself. Once I can do that, I will adjust that attitude because the honesty within me and the sincerity within me will make me see the other with a vision that is wanting to include them rather than exclude them. So this attitude of adjustment, or the adjustment that is required in this discriminatory attitude, requires a courage that allows me to stand face to face with life with sincerity and honesty. And that is a beautiful thing to do, because this is where that golden rule emerges. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. The attitude I have toward another is the attitude the other will have toward me. So to strengthen a benevolent attitude, consider other ways of looking at people who are different to you through the lens of equality and inclusivity. Look for ways to include others, to appreciate differences, and to remove illusions of separation. Attitude adjustments build inner strength. So why would I apply those 3 examples of attitude adjustment? It's because I know that it does something for me. It builds an inner strength inside of me. Attitude adjustments serve to highlight our life with optimism and to color the inner canvas of our souls with new hope, with good company, and with benevolent reframing. Attitude adjustments build inner strength, and this strength is sustained through contemplative and reflective practices. Now, our practice as a power to sustain. So if you don't have a practice, I suggest that you develop one, that you look for one that is meditative, that is reflective, that is contemplative in nature, because those practices require us to be looking inside of ourselves and making sense and meaning of what's going on the inside of ourselves. I personally practice Raj Yoga, which is a purely spiritual practice that focuses on the soul's relationship with God, the source, the divine. The strength drawn from this connection between the soul and the source, or the source and God, gives one the spiritual capacity to transform the awareness. Remember, before the attitude adjustment, I need a powerful awareness. So it transforms the weak awareness so that I can inculcate a powerful awareness, which in turn would strengthen my attitude, which in turn would change my perception from negative to positive, and which in turn would lead me to an action that would be uplifting, or what is usually called a poetic action. The results from this practicing of Raj Yoga that I do, with the soul connecting to God to get the strength to do that, changes my feelings. It constructs in me a behavior that is strong, that is fully kind of attentive, a behavior that knows how to behave in the circumstances before it. And it also removes false beliefs and replaces it with the practical living experiences in life. Changing our attitudes requires changing the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave, and the way we believe. And it also means that we may not be able to change the situations and circumstances in the world outside, but it definitely tells us we can change and we can adjust our attitude in response to those situations and circumstances on the outside. But for this, we need to cultivate personal spiritual growth, and we need to dedicate time to our inner work. Inner work is not tedious or boring. It is a dynamic process, and it is rather an intriguing journey, returning to our authentic self. In closing, I encourage you to use these three examples of attitude adjustments and create your own that are specific to your life, to your reality, but more so to your unique creativity. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you for inviting me to be part of a very important response that we need to have to many of the things that are happening to us suddenly. And that's the response from the level of attitude. Small attitude adjustments would make that response so much more meaningful and so much less fearful. Enjoy your life, create your attitude adjustments, and be ready to face the situations as and when they occur. Now, let us reflect on attitude adjustment from the inner quiet of our souls. Let us be aware of the peace within. And from this seat of the soul, from this embodiment of peace, let me reflect.